It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco.
My first allegiance is what will be best for the Philadelphia Eagles and our fans for the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by Prop Swap, where America buys and sells sports bets. You take your bet and take that ticket and post it on PropSwap.com and then watch the bids come in so you can sell your sports bet to other bettors and make money using PropSwap.com. It's funny, I was talking to a guy today who says, I never heard of this Prop Swap. I hear you talk about this Prop Swap, and now me and all my friends are Prop Swappers. I said, yeah, because you're making money. That's what the whole point of it is. It's a great, great idea. The guys at PropSwap.com who bring you the 4 o'clock hour of the Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. NFL Draft, we are getting closer and closer. Mock drafts are coming out hot and heavy. They're all over the place. I love getting into them with Andrew DiCecco as when we get his thoughts on mock drafts and things that could happen, and we get questions from our listeners who are watching on the stream. If you have a draft question that you want to have me ask Andrew DiCecco, send it to me now, and we'll get that to Andrew, who is now with me here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline for another edition of Football at 4. What's going on, Andrew?
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
All is well. We got about 2 weeks left to go, so 2 weeks from this Thursday, the NFL draft will be here. I know people will say, like, don't you ever get tired of talking about the draft? I say, no, I don't. Do you ever get tired of getting into all the scenarios that could happen on draft day?
No, not really. I mean, this is probably my favorite time of the football season. The whole draft process and assessing team needs and what may or may not happen.
All right. So I love reading the mock drafts, not because I put a lot of stock in them, just because I like to see what people's thoughts are on who could fall, who gets there. Mel Kiper, who, of course, is one of the more notable names when it comes to doing these mock drafts, he put his 4.0 out today. Philadelphia Eagles, Patrick Surtain, the second, falls to number 12. Now, I want to get your thoughts on, number one, the fit, and number two, how realistic you see Patrick Surtain falling to number 12.
Well, to answer the first part of your question, I do like the fit. I mean, like I was saying before, he is of all the premier corners in this draft, he's the most pro-ready that you can kind of plug right in. He has a very refined skill set, really active, tough physical defender, sort of the same type of background of the defensive backs that Jonathan Gannon has had success with. You look at Xavier Rhodes, he's somewhat of that makeup, and he's very technically savvy. And like I said, he gets his hands on a lot of football, on a lot of balls, but you want to see him kind of convert those deflections into the interceptions at the next level. But I mean, I look at the draft, and I think that the Carolina Panthers at 8 would be an awfully nice destination for him, and hard for them to pass up. Now that they have their quarterback, they may look to address the defensive side, and their secondary is extremely fluid right now. They don't have a ton there at corner. I mean, Dante Jackson's more of a nickel corner. I believe A.J. Boye is going to miss the first couple weeks of the season, which is due to a suspension. And there's not a lot of viable options there. So I think that makes a ton of sense to kind of pair him with Jeremy Chin.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people are wondering, I see people in the chat saying, wow, there's no way Patrick Surtain gets by Dallas. Well, in this mock draft, Mel Kiper has a trade where Dallas gets out of that spot with New England. New England takes a quarterback, which then opens up the extra corner to fall to Philadelphia. And they actually have Dallas taking J.C. Horn at number 15. So if both Horn and Surtain are on the board, who's your guy?
Well, I mean, if you want to go for the higher ceiling, I think you're going to go for J.C. Horn, who last time we spoke, I kind of likened his skill set when asked to make a comparison to a Jalen Ramsey type of player. Now, Jalen Ramsey was far more polished coming out of college, but I do think that he has the physicality, that same mentality, the athleticism to grow into that potential role. and he has some all pros. But if you want a guy who's going to step right in right now, need very little adjusting to get to the NFL level, it's going to be a steady starter for you. I think that's going to be Patrick Surtain. So it all depends on what the Eagles are really looking for. If you want to go for that immense upside, I think you have to look at J.C. Horn.
Yeah, I know. I was a little torn on what to do there because a lot of times you figure, okay, someone's going to take Patrick Surtain in the top 10 and he's not going to be there, and fixating on Horn, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, what if they're both there? What happens in that situation? So I found that to be interesting. One of the other kind of interesting parts about this particular mock draft, which was who was after Philadelphia. So I want to ask you about, all right, Patrick Surtain at 12. What if it's between a guy like Rashawn Slater, Patrick Surtain? Are you going the offensive lineman, or are you sticking with the corner?
Well, I think in that scenario, I think you go with the corner, because there's many who believe that it will be a J.C. Horn or Patrick Surtain. Either one of those guys could be the cornerback one of this draft class. There isn't like a bona fide top, a definitive answer in that. And Rashawn Slater's, it's Penei Sewell, and then there's a bit of a drop off there. Whereas the cornerbacks, I mean, either one of those guys is going to be, they're going to have a long, prosperous career at the NFL level and be ready to step in and contribute early in their careers, which is what the Eagles really need right now. So I think that they really need to add that building block at corner. They've struggled to adequately address that over more than the past decade, and I think they need to get that right. They're going to have an opportunity likely to take one, and I think they gotta grab one and coach them up.
Andrew, I saw a mock draft last night, so I'll throw a name into the mix here. They had the Eagles taking Kwity Paye at number 12. Would you be more willing to take the edge rusher at 12, or would you still go corner?
Well, I mean, and this is about a month ago, I likened Kwity Paye to a top 12 to 15 player and said that if the Eagles were to trade back, I thought that he would be, an interesting option given the Michigan background, his similarities to a Brandon Graham, the versatility, and he kind of fits the mold of what the Eagles really look for in a pass rusher. Now, that said, Kwity Paye at 12 is a little bit, given the players that could potentially be on the board, I think that would be a little bit of a reach in that it depends. The Eagles they have that propensity to kind of, they always want to strengthen the trenches. So there's always that's going to be in the back of everyone's mind. But I think that they really need to get it right and not overthink things. Take the corner, which in all likelihood is going to be the top player on the board. And I think you just got to get that and start to build their defense and with some with a cornerstone, no pun intended.
Yeah. Now the reasoning behind taking Kwity Paye at number 12 was the fact that that's how they built their Super Bowl defense with the pass rushers, the edge rusher. But Andrew, the defensive coordinator is different. The defensive scheme is going to be different. This team needs corners in the worst way.
Yeah, they definitely do, and that's something that needs to be taken into account, Mike. We don't really know what this defensive philosophy is going to be. We know that Jonathan Gannon has a defensive background, which leads me to believe that they're going to put a little bit more of an emphasis on strengthening that area relatively early in his tenure. And when you're going to and when we're talking about the players that could potentially be available there, I think that'd be a no-brainer to get that in there. And then, like you said, they need corners in the worst way. And based on the success that he's had with corners of that similar mold, I think you have to get that guy, and then it becomes their job to make sure that you're coaching them and teaching them properly so they can adequately adjust to the next level.
All right, we do have some questions coming in for Andrew. If you have questions that you want to throw Andrew's way, you can get us in a couple of ways. On the text board, 609-403-0973. If you want to hit us up on the text board. If you're watching the live video and you're on the stream, you could just put it in the chat, and then we will get to your questions. Wally wants to know, rumors about the Eagles wanting a quarterback. Is Kyle Trask that guy, and how high would you go to get that quarterback? Round 3, when should the Eagles start thinking about getting another quarterback, and who is one that you would target?
Well, Wally, I mean, I don't he certainly, Kyle Trask, that is, wouldn't be in the conversation at 12.
No, I think this is like if you're getting that guy in the middle rounds.
Oh, in the middle rounds, I mean, Jamie Newman, I think, would make a lot of sense because of his athleticism and his raw ability that I think that you get him in there and have Brian Johnson really sort of refine his skill set and really get the most out of him. I think he'd be an intriguing option to sort of push Jalen Hurts. But, I mean, as far as those middle-round quarterbacks, well, you're not really going to find anybody that's definitively better or offers more upside than Jalen. So I think at that point you're really looking to get a young guy who has some upside, some potential that you're not necessarily depending on, but that's going to keep Jalen Hurts on his toes. So to me, that would be in the mold of like a Jamie Newman.
Yeah, I think the second level of quarterbacks in this draft, when do you think that next group will start to go off the board? Are there second-round quarterbacks, or when do you think that next group of QB starts to go?
Yeah, I think it's going to be probably mid-second round. I mean, quarterbacks, after the first round, there's obviously a definitive drop-off, but quarterbacks tend to go off the board like the Kyle Trask. Like there's that next tier that's going to start to come off the board in the second round. But, you know, I think that there's no after like Mac Jones, there's no quarterback that really like jumps out and it's like, this guy is going to be a future, you know, face of the franchise, in my opinion.
Right. Chris wants to know, could the Eagles trade back up to get a Pitts or a Chase? Would either one of them be there around 8 or 9?
Well, I mean, that's interesting, and I wouldn't rule that out, certainly, because I think that, you know, depending on how the draft board falls, I still have a really hard time thinking that Pitts gets past Atlanta at 4. I just have a funny feeling that they're going to kind of they want to add a dimension to their offense. They've always had an explosive offense with certain skill players, and as far as I think Chase, there's a chance that Chase could be there. But I mean, I think you would have to get back into that, you know, 8-7 range in order to secure that, because you're not. I mean, if Chase is there, Dallas is getting him. I mean, Dallas, they always go for those flashy weapons, and he wouldn't pass them.
Well, if it's Chase and Pitts there, is Dallas? Which one are they taking, Chase or Pitts?
Well, they're decent enough at receiver. I mean, they just got CeeDee Lamb last year, so I think Kyle Pitts would make a lot of sense to them. A lot of sense for them to take him.
All right, another question. Andrew, what would you think if the Eagles took Kellen Munn in the back half of the draft? Seems like there's some upside there. Very weird-looking throwing motion. That's from Jalen.
Yeah. Well, what's up, Jalen? Kellen Mond to me is a very interesting prospect. Obviously, he wouldn't be counted on to really push Jalen. He's not going to be a threat in his first season. It's not really till his second season. But I really like I really have a lot of confidence in their quarterback coach, Brian Johnson. So they can afford to take a project quarterback like that. And I do think that he has enough skills to sort of, if they can hone his skills, I think he can be a legitimate NFL quarterback. I think that would be tremendous value adding a player like that. And those are when you talk about dart throws, I mean, that's a calculated dart throw that if you bring him into the fold, he does have some NFL upside. Then it just becomes about refining his skill set, getting the throwing motion down, and working on certain little subtleties and nuances of his game. But he certainly has a lot to like in his game.
All right, another question for Andrew. If you have another question for Andrew, we'll try to fit a couple more in. Text 609-403-0973, or if you're in the live chat, just leave it over there. Andrew, would you trade up in front of Dallas to get Patrick Surtain?
If that's their guy, if that's their top corner on their board, I would not leave it up to chance, because, you know, knowing Dallas's tendencies, they just got Trayvon Diggs last year. They need to get younger at corner. They're gonna probably be in them. They're certainly in the market for a corner. They need help all over the place. But I mean, I think just to ensure, if that's your top guy, you have to do that.
Right. So if Patrick Surtain, if you come into this draft, he's your top guy. If he's on the board at 8 or 9, you're going to have to jump over Dallas with fear that they could take him because they're not trading with you.
Oh, absolutely. If he's your guy and he's within striking distance, you have to do whatever you can to leapfrog Dallas and make sure you secure that.
All right. Chris wants to know, would you trust – I can't imagine your answer would be yes on this, but I'll ask you and let you answer it. Chris wants to know, would you trust Avonte Maddox to be the Eagles' second corner across from Slay?
Not even close. I don't.
Does he have a role? Can he play? Can he play nickel?
I think, yeah, I certainly think he can play nickel. But the thing that really stuck out to me, Mike, is the Eagles kind of poked around at the nickel corner from the 49ers. And knowing that Avonte Maddox can't play on the outside, but you have a young nickel corner already on your roster, it kind of led me to believe that maybe they have some plans to use him at safety and deploy him there. He's kind of a positionless type player, in my opinion. I think ultimately his best position is in the slot, and you have a low cost young option there. But it was kind of curious. It was kind of peculiar to me to see them look at a 30-year-old nickel corner from San Francisco. But I mean, he's not an outside corner. He was miscast last year, and they thought they could get by. I thought it was really egregious on their end to part with both Rasul and Sidney Jones before the season, and you probably put all your eggs into Avonte Maddox's basket, and he did not deliver. And it was very apparent that teams their game plan was to throw at him and attack him early, and he just was not up to the task.
Yeah, well,
they can't go into the season with him as their number two, and nor do I think that they will.
No, and he wouldn't fit Jonathan Gannon. You know, the cover two needs a big physical corner. He's a small guy over there. Last year, I know that you liked the signing of Nickel Roby-Coleman. Would you take a shot on bringing him back here and having him work with Jonathan Gannon?
Yeah, I mean, if the price is right, it certainly would have to match up because you're not going to break the bank certainly for Nickel Roby-Coleman. I mean, he's a 5'8" corner that didn't really show you a whole lot last year, but he is a ball-hawking, fundamentally sound corner, and there's a role for those guys in the NFL. I'd be interested to see what you can get out of him with a different coach and a different system and see if you can really get him because at both of his stops with the Bills and the Rams, I mean, he looked like a marginally different player than what he did with the Eagles. So I think that, yeah, sure, why not? If the money lines up, bring him back in there. Worst case scenario, it doesn't work out, and you part ways at the end of the summer.
What wide receiver is going to get drafted too high?
Well, that's a good question. I'd probably Rashad Bateman or Kadarius Toney, I would say. I would go with Toney from Florida. And you get Percy Harvin vibes from him. And Percy Harvin was certainly a dynamic player in his time, but there's just too many question marks surrounding his game and how can he be deployed? Is he going to be able to become a proficient route runner? That's always the hardest transition for young receivers, learning an NFL route tree. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can be a dynamic playmaker all you want, but I think teams sometimes get enamored with the athleticism and the speed, and they don't really look at how they can fit. And I think he's going to get overdrafted because of his sheer athleticism and kind of like a Cordero Patterson. And then you have to figure out how you're going to use them. And I think sometimes those guys, they try to shoehorn these guys into the offense, and it doesn't quite work out.
All right, another question for Andrew. Greg Cosell today was absolutely raving about Jason Owe, his athleticism today on Inside the Birds. He says he's one of the best athletes at the position he has ever evaluated. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the pro day just solidified that. I mean, you talk about lateral movement, his hand usage, his quickness, his burst off the ball. I mean, this is a guy that's going to be a disruptive force at the next level. He's going to live on the other side of the line of scrimmage, and you need as many. The game is won in the trenches, and I think that he definitely helped his draft stock. I mean, he's certainly not going to go where many of the mock drafts had him going before his pro day because he just completely blew the doors off that more than some may have even anticipated. So I'm a big fan of his game. And I mean, there's not a definitive number one pass rusher in this draft. I mean, Russo's got a lot of love. Quiddy Pay's got some love. Phillips has gotten some love, but I mean, Jason Owe has really made a name for himself and is really going to be in contention for either that first or second spot.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, NFL Draft, 17 days away. We have more draft coverage for you here during Football at 4. Jeff's back tomorrow. Andrew's here on Thursday. We'll take more of your questions. And Andrew, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, Andrew, good stuff, man.
Yeah, appreciate the questions, guys.
All right, we'll do that again on Thursday when Andrew's back for your questions. And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.